I mean, I think in a sense that, evolutionarily, it's not a linear thing necessarily, but it's like, first neurotransmitters had to be evolved, and they were sort of just out there and mediating God knows what kind of relationships. But then once you got primates, or these big brain primates with these complex nervous system, a lot of these neurotransmitters that occurred in plants, became internalized and adapted, to brain functions. And it's almost as though, Gaia needed somebody to, talk to, in the simplest sense. And I think that's the function of these things, is a communication between, the sentience that resides in nature and us, who are part of nature, but a lot of times don't think of ourselves as part of nature, and we have this sense of a separateness from nature. And I think that's part of the lesson that psychedelics generally, and DMT especially, teaches us, is that we're not really part of nature. We're not really separate from nature. We're a part of this mix, and it's just a kind of an arrogance on our part that makes us think we're. I mean, Terence, half tongue-in-cheek, wrote the foreword to the Psilocybin Mushroom Growers Guide, saying, the mushroom's intelligence, and it has it has information about how to build technologies and things like that. But if you really think about the whole SETI thing, and the communication with extraterrestrial intelligence, and all the efforts to detect radio signals, from an advanced civilization. I mean, the premises that surround that idea are so naive, it's almost embarrassing. The notion that an extremely advanced technological civilization would even bother with radio, is just silly. No, it ain't gonna come that way, or it may come that way, but there's lots of ways that it may come. And I've actually read speculations where people have said, well, you could build a message into DNA which would not be detected until the civilization had reached the point where they could do molecular biology, they could sequence these things, and they could see, that there's actually a meaningful sequence of information there. Well, how about make DMT?
Well, yeah, just turn the N-methyltransferase on.
Yeah, turn the N-methyltransferase on and make a compound that when you take it shows you machines and starships and aliens and weird cities and all this stuff. I mean, what could be less ambiguous? There's no mystery. That is the message. And it's interesting that tryptophan, which is, again, in everything, right, one of these essential amino acids. But, the genetic code, and I don't know what you want to infer from this, what I'm getting to, or if anything, but the genetic code is what they call a degenerate code, right? Meaning there are the DNA codes for 64 triplets that code for amino acids, but there are only 20 amino acids, right? So for every amino acid, there's generally more than one codon, so it's a redundant thing. Sometimes the different codons will code ultimately in transcription and protein synthesis for the same amino acids. The one exception to this is tryptophan. There's only one codon that codes for tryptophan out of all 64. So what does that mean? Probably nothing. But you could speculate and say, well, it's an artifact. It was put there. It was built into the way this whole thing works. And again, it's sort of like the fact that DMT is, you know, the fact that DMT permeates nature so much is kind of like a cosmic joke in a way. It's nature playing with us. It's nature saying, you know, get it? Do you get it? You know, the fact that 2 steps away from tryptophan, there is a molecule that opens transcendent dimensions. Yeah, aren't we clever? You know, that and maybe the fact that tryptophan is only coded by 1 codon, maybe that's a sign that at some point, you know, the whole thing was designed or genetically engineered in some way. And I don't postulate, I mean, you know, alien super biotechnologists or whatever, you know, but they could have done it. And if they, and I'm not saying they did or that I believe this, I'm just saying as a fun thing to speculate, it's interesting that it's not that far-fetched, you know. I mean, if they have these technologies and they, you know, their time frame is millions of years, billions of years, who knows what they could have done, you know, back a long time ago to engineer a situation that they could, you know, figure would evolve to this. You know, I don't know. I mean, that's what's fascinating about DMT. Nobody knows, so we're free to speculate. In intelligent design in the way that the intelligent design people, because they postulate something outside is pulling the strings, and I think what's going on is that it's an inherent, and essentially it's the universe coming awake to itself. I think that consciousness permeates reality, and that what we're seeing is, you know, the sentient universe in a way in the process of waking up to itself, and that's where, and we're part of that process. We're something that had to, you know, be developed so it could have self-reflection, at least in this very small part of the cosmos. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, and I think, you know, I mean, I think that is one thing. If DMT does nothing else in terms of affecting our understanding, if it does nothing else, it reminds us that we don't know very much about anything. So it reminds us about our own ignorance and the limitations of our knowledge. And I think it's an incentive to be humble. It's an incentive to say, we don't know shit. You know, we think we know a lot, but we really don't know. And so that's useful, you know, or an incentive to be humble, and an incentive particularly for science, you know, which tends to be very arrogant, you know, and they've got a few things figured out and they think they have the whole thing figured out, but they don't. And I think DMT is a forcible reminder that there's a lot more about reality, the universe, ourselves, the biosphere, whatever, that there's a lot more to it than we imagine.